UFC Fight Night Fiziev versus Gamrot is this weekend. I'm going to give you a full card prediction and breakdown of all 11 fights on this card, starting with Monsterrat Rendon versus Tamires Vidal. I'm going to go with Tamires Vidal in this matchup. She's 25 years of age, and Monsterrat Rendon is making her UFC debut at 34 years of age. They are both pretty decent on the ground, but Tamires Vidal in her last fight got out KO over Ramona Pascal due to like a flying knee. I don't even know if it was really like a flying knee. I think it was just a regular knee. Then it wasn't like a super brutal KO, but Ramona Pascal kind of just faded after she did get hit with it, and the ref kind of just stopped it from there. So it was a pretty good win to have for Tamires Vidal. Again, she's still very young. I am going to edge to the younger fighter here because I think she is going to be improving. This was 10 months ago since her last fight. She's a relatively heavier favorite here, minus 250 favorite according to Tapology. I am going to go with Vidal. Probably by decision. I don't know how this fight will necessarily go. Maybe Vidal has improved quite a bit and does end up getting the finish on the feet here and TKOing her, but I am going to just stick with the decision here because I just don't know too big of a read on this fight. We'll see what Tamires Vidal looks like after a longer layoff. Up the card, we have Mizuki Inoue versus Hannah Goldy. I am going to go with Mizuki Inoue. Hannah Goldy is not that great of a fighter. I'm going to be completely honest. Her last fight was a loss to Molly McCann about a year ago by KO. And, I mean, Molly McCann is not good herself. So, Mizuki Inoue lost to Amanda Lemos in her last fight about 3 years ago. Before then, beat Inoue by split decision. So, she's only had a couple fights in the UFC, but still 29 years of age. I'm going to bet on her. I'm not, like, actually betting. I'm not going to bet on this fight. But I'm going to just say that I think she has a better chance at winning this fight than Hannah Goldy does. But who knows? I could be super wrong here. It is a lower level women's MMA bout. But I'm going to go Inoue by decision, 89% picked by Tapology. That's what I'm going to go with in this one. Up the card, we have Jake Collier versus Mohammed Usman. I am going to go with Mohammed Usman in this one. Jake Collier has not looked good at all in his last couple fights. His last fight was a loss to Martin Buday, which is Martin Buday is a pretty solid fighter, so I don't mind him losing that one by decision, but the real one is Chris Barnett by KO. He really shouldn't have lost that fight, but I guess he has like a win against Chase Sherman, which isn't that bad of a win to have, I guess. Lost to Andre Arlovsky by split decision, lost to Carlos Felipe by decision. But Mo Usman, decent wrestler. I don't know, how would you even measure this kind of stuff in the heavyweight division? I mean, he's got some good wrestling for heavyweight, does have some really good power in his hands. The technical skill isn't really there. It is heavyweight after all, but I mean, if Chris Barnett is finishing you up on the ground, I think Mo Usman can do it. I think he can either take him down or you can finish him up on the feet. I think he ends up catching Jake Collier here. I don't know how much of a threat Jake Collier is on the feet at this point. I think Mo Usman just catches him and gets the early finish in the first round. I think this is a pretty relatively easy fight for him rather than Junior Tafa, who is actually a relatively bigger threat because of the KO power in his hands. I'm surprised they gave him Jake Collier because Jake Collier seems like a easier matchup in this one. So I am going to go with Mo Usman by finish on the feet here. They're both 34 years of age, so they're both relatively old here. Usman will have a half an inch reach advantage. I think he does get the finish by KO. 90% picked for Tapology here on Mo Usman, 66% by TKO KO, 27% by decision. Up the card, we have Jacob Malkoun versus Cody Brundage. I am going to go with Jacob Malkoun in this one, just practically based on Cody Brundage getting completely out-wrestled by Cedric Dumas, and I was not expecting that. Cody Brundage has always been seen kind of like a solid guy, like good, decent wrestling, decent on the feet. He can hang in there a little bit more, but I mean, you can't really get out wrestled and grappled by Cedric Dumas and expect me to pick you against Jacob Malkoun, who at least made it competitive with Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen, I think, was top 10 ranked, I want to say. I don't know exactly what his rank is, but made a pretty competitive matchup there. I don't think Jacob Malkoun won that fight, but it was relatively competitive. He did a really good job in the wrestling department. I think he can just easily out-wrestle Cody Brundage here. We'll see what he looks like. His last fight was 10 months ago against Nick Maximov, and I think Nick Maximov got injured in that matchup and then afterwards got cut. So it was a little bit of a weird situation there, but I am going to go with the younger fighter here. Or I'm not the younger. Well, he's a year younger in this one, but 28 years of age for Jacob Malkoun. A little bit of time off. I hope he improved a little bit more, especially on the striking. Maybe we see a little bit more of an improved Jacob Malkoun on the feet. But I am going to go with Jacob Malkoun, just completely out-wrestling him here. Maybe he does end up getting a finish, but I don't mind this going to decision either. So 94% picked by Tapology, 78% by decision, 11% by TKO KO. I am going to go with Jacob Malkoun by decision. Up the card, we have Tim Means versus Andre Fialho. This one's a little bit of a rough one because I really like Andre Fialho, but his last 3 fights he's lost by KO, and he's kind of burned me on those. Jake Matthews looked incredible against Andre Fialho. Muslim Salikov ended up getting the finish against him, and then Joaquin Buckley ended up getting the finish recently. So it's been pretty rough for Andre Fialho in general, but Tim Means getting up there in age, 40 years of age at this point. Lost to Kevin Holland by submission, lost to Max Griffin by split decision, which isn't that bad of a loss to have at this point. That was, only about 10 months ago. Alex Morono lost that one by submission about 4 months ago. So I am going to go with Andre Fialho. This is pretty much, in my brain, like a 55-45 situation here. I think Fialho, at this point, 29 years of age, going to be 10 years younger. Is just going to be a little bit faster. I know he is hittable, and I can see Tim Means catching him and finishing him, but I don't know. I think Fialho would be a little bit faster. Will have a little bit more pop in his shots, and I think he does have a chance to get a finish here. I don't mind him getting a decision. I think this one, if it does go to decision, it'll probably be closer. Maybe Tim Means lands a couple good shots and gets a really good reaction out of Fialho, but I think Fialho ends up edging this one out, 29-28 decision. If not, there is a pretty solid finishing chance for each one of these guys, and I don't mind him getting the TKO. Especially a lot of people on Tapology, 75% picked for Tapology here for Fialho, 79% picked for TKO KO, 13% by decision. I don't mind the finish, but after the last 3 fights for Fialho, can you really trust him in this matchup? I don't know. I hope he gets back on track here, but man, I can see Tim Means making this a little bit more competitive. I don't think Fialho is the Morono type there. Morono beat Semmelsberger, if you want to use some MMA math here. Morono beat Semmelsberger. Semmelsberger beat Jake Matthews. And Jake Matthews absolutely outclassed Andre Fialho on the feet. So take that with what you will. But it's weird MMA math. I probably shouldn't have brought it up. But I think this is going to be a closer fight. 29-28 decision. I think Tim Means makes this a little bit more competitive. But there is a pretty solid chance of a finish for either one of these guys. So we'll see what happens. Up the card, we have Miles Johns versus Dan Argueta. I am going to go with Dan Argueta. His last fight was a pretty weird fight against Ronnie Lawrence where it did get prematurely stopped. I think Keith Peterson went in there to check on Ronnie Lawrence in that one, and Ronnie Lawrence gave him the thumbs up, and for some reason Keith Peterson stopped it, or it was like something along the lines of that. So this is a very weird stoppage. It's a very weird matchup, but Dan Argueta looked really good in that one. I actually picked Ronnie Lawrence, I believe. I was actually really thinking about taking Argueta in that one, but ended up siding with Lawrence. I was a little bit wrong there. I guess it ended up being a no contest at that point, but Dan Argueta looked really good. The only guy to really throw around Ronnie Lawrence like that in the grappling was Saidyokub Kakhramonov, and he's a really good grappler. He's not in the UFC anymore, weirdly enough, but he probably should be. I don't know why they got rid of him anyways, but Dan Argueta, a very dominant grappler. I think he can just out-wrestle Miles Johns in this one, and I think Miles Johns coming off a win against Vince Morales, Kevin Nati Vidal, who isn't that great of a fighter either, getting finishes over them, Anderson Dos Santos KO, lost to John Castaneda. I think we kind of can figure out where Miles Johns is at this point. 29 years of age, so took about, 10 months off. Can definitely improve before this fight, but I think Dan Argueta just has really dominant grappling. I think he can get this one done, probably by decision. Maybe he does get the submission. He was able to get in a really good spot against Ronnie Lawrence where he almost got him submitted in that matchup. So maybe you can do the same to Miles Johns. So I think it's probably about 50-50 on submission or decision in this matchup, kind of like how Tapology has it, 73% for Argueta, 51% by decision, 38% by submission. I can see it going either way. Maybe Argueta gets a submission later on in this fight in about the second or third round, where he starts to impose his will on Miles Johns, but we'll see how this one goes. I think it'll probably be 50-50 on whether it is a decision or a submission in this one. Up the card, we have Charles Jourdain versus Ricardo Ramos. I am going to go with Charles Jourdain in this one. I think he's going to have a pretty complete fight plan for this one, if that's how you'll say it. Ricardo Ramos is a very unique and unorthodox and crazy striker in general. He throws a lot of wild shit. Like in his last fight against Danny Chavez, I think it was a spinning back elbow, and he finished him against the fence. A pretty brutal KO as well, a year and 2 months ago. So he's a very wild fighter. Lost to Zubair Tukhugov by decision. Beat Bill Algeo by decision, which is actually a really good one to have. and then lost to Lerone Murphy by KO there. But Charles Jourdain, I'm trying to fix how I say his name because apparently I had it Jourdain correctly. Moved over to Jourdain because I think that's how people were pronouncing it. Like the UFC was doing that, and now they moved back to Jourdain. So I'm trying to fix it. But Jourdain, I think he's going to come out with a super complete game plan. He said he's going to be taking his career a little bit more seriously. He still does all the memes and stuff outside of it, but I think he's going to be taking it a little bit more seriously. He's said it multiple times, quite a bit, especially recently. I think he's going to be looking for wrestling, grappling. I think he's going to be mixing in his work on the feet as well. And I think he's just going to have a complete game plan here, mixing it up completely on Ricardo Ramos. Ramos is a very wild fighter, so this could get into a scrap relatively early. But I think if I'm gonna ride with someone in this matchup to be good in the later rounds and kind of rely on like a wrestling grappling game plan where it is going to get super wild and they're going to try to eke out a win here, I am going to go with Charles Jourdain in this one. I think he can get a win by decision. I think he just out grapples Ricardo Ramos in the later rounds, and I think he lands the better shots on the feet. I think he'll look for takedowns eventually, like later in the first round, kind of to get Ramos thinking about it, and I think he can start landing some of his good stuff on the feet, and I think Ramos will start to tire out as the fight goes on. So I am going to go with Charles Jourdain by decision, 79% picked by Tapology here, 69% by decision, 20% by TKO KO. I think this will go to a decision. I think Jourdain, again, is going to have a complete game plan here, showing that he is taking his career very seriously. So up the card, we have Bryan Battle versus AJ Fletcher. I am going to go with Bryan Battle on this one. Bryan Battle is coming off a really good win against Gabe Green, finished him, put him out pretty brutally in that last matchup, won by KO there. And then lost to Rinat Fakhretdinov right before then. I think he took that fight on short notice. I think he got hurt on the feet and then just completely out-wrestled on the ground. Of course, you know Bryan Battle, the winner of, TUF 29, I want to say. Decent on the ground. Really good on the feet, has shown, especially in the welterweight division, has shown to have a lot more power. Striking looks a lot better at welterweight, especially. But he does have a decent ground game. You didn't really get to see that against Rinat Fakhretdinov because Fakhretdinov's a very good wrestler himself. So AJ Fletcher is also a very good wrestler. Last fight, he finally eked out a win against Nemba Garimbo, who's going on to win himself. Obviously, I think Garimbo, especially to the people that pay attention to the sport quite a bit, you probably know who he is at this point because all the rock stuff and all that. But he ended up getting a win over him, who's a very solid fighter. Angelusa lost to him, had a pretty fun fight there. It was pretty much a war. I think it was at altitude as well, so it was a really fun fight, but he ended up losing that one by decision. I lost to Matthew Semmelsberger, which these two guys are very solid fighters at welterweight, so it's not necessarily a bad thing to lose to them. But definitely was a little bit of a rough start for him. So he's 26 years of age, so he's still pretty young, but he will be at a 10-inch reach disadvantage in this one. He does train with Dustin Poirier quite a bit. I am going to go with Bryan Battle. I think he's just going to have too much power in his hands, and I think he does have a decent grappling game to where he can defend some of the takedowns of AJ Fletcher. You haven't seen AJ Fletcher do too great in his fights. You've seen him kind of put it together recently, but I think the 10-inch reach advantage is actually insane in this matchup, and Bryan Battle just has a lot of power at welterweight, and I think he ended up catching AJ Fletcher probably in the second round here. I think he defends some of the takedowns. Maybe AJ Fletcher does get some success. Bryan Battle works his way back up and lands some good shots right before the end of the first. In the second round, I think Bryan Battle gets a little bit more comfortable and catches AJ Fletcher coming in and ends up KOing him. I think he gets the finish in the second round here. 92% of Tapology is picking Bryan Battle in this one, 60% by TKO KO, 7% by submission, and 26% by decision. So I am going to go with Bryan Battle by second round, TKO KO. Up the card, we have Marina Rodriguez versus Michelle Waterson. I am going to go with Marina Rodriguez. Michelle Waterson seems to kind of be on like the downward slope of her career. I know Marina Rodriguez is coming off of 2 losses against Verna Jandiroba by decision, and then a loss to Amanda Lemos by KO, which was kind of a weird stoppage. I felt Marina Rodriguez was actually doing pretty well, and then once Amanda Lemos actually like rocked her for a second, they just stopped it relatively quickly. So that was a little bit of a weirder fight there, but I feel like those 2 losses are against pretty high level opponents, and I know Michelle Waterson lost to Amanda Lemos, ended up having a little bit of a weirder fight there, little iffy decision against Luana Pinheiro. So I am going to go with Marina Rodriguez. I think she gets this one done. Although they are closer in age, I still think she has a little bit left in her, and I think she'll be able to outstrike Michelle Waterson. Michelle Waterson isn't bad, but again, Marina Rodriguez has already won by decision about, 2 years ago. I think she can do the same here. Just completely outstrike her on the feet. 3-inch reach advantage as well. Minus 305 favorite. Tapology is going to be picking Rodriguez in this one, 87% by decision. I think it's pretty straightforward in my brain. I'm actually surprised they're kind of doing this rematch, but I think Marina Rodriguez has a lot of success again on the feet. I think she just outstrikes her 30-27 for another decision win. Up the card, we have Bryce Mitchell versus Dan Ige. I am going to go with Bryce Mitchell here. I think this is a really interesting matchup because I feel like Dan Ige has the power and has the ability to take down, or not take down, has the ability to defend the takedowns of Bryce Mitchell in this one and make it really interesting. But I'm just going to have to side with Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell hasn't fought in a while, hasn't fought in 8 months. I think he's supposed to fight Jonathan Pierce or whatever, and a bunch of pullouts happened or whatever. So he hasn't been able to fight. He does have a lot of stuff going on, it seems like, in his personal life. So we'll see if that affects him in this one. But I think Bryce Mitchell will just be able to out-wrestle Dan Ige in this one. Remember, he has a win over Edson Barboza, where he just completely out-wrestled him. I think he even dropped him in that first round or whatever. It looked really good in that matchup. But then ran into Ilia Topuria. He said he was sick, but I mean, Topuria did really well. Bryce Mitchell actually ended up taking down Topuria and controlling him for a little bit there. So that's actually a pretty good thing to have a little bit if you wanted to take something from that fight. Him being able to take down Ilia Topuria, who's a very good wrestler, a very good grappler, has really good transitions, really good scrambles, like you saw in that Emmett fight, just him circling around him. I think in that 5th round, he showed it off quite a bit, but looked really good in that match. Well, Bryce Mitchell did not look really good against Ilia Topuria. I'll just say, in the moment, taking down Ilia Topuria and controlling him there, I think was something you can take out of that fight. I'll just put it that way, because Bryce Mitchell got beat up pretty badly. But I think Dan Ige isn't Ilia Topuria, especially in the grappling game, and I don't think he can defend the takedowns quite like Ilia Topuria can. I think Bryce Mitchell, he's going to be able to walk down Dan Ige here and land some good shots. I think Bryce Mitchell is going to be able to take some of the shots early on from Dan Ige, but as this fight goes on, I can see Bryce Mitchell pushing a pace a little bit more on Dan Ige in this matchup and inflicting some of his grappling that he's known for. So especially the way he was able to do it to Barboza. I know Dan Ige is going to be a little bit of a smaller fighter than Barboza. Like, he's 5'7", Bryce Mitchell's 5'10", so he's going to be a little bit more stockier. And it's going to be harder to get some of these takedowns. And Dan Ige does have some decent takedown defense, but I just think Bryce Mitchell over time, just shooting for some of the takedowns, the pace that he does fight at, I think it's going to be pretty successful against Dan Ige in this one. Again, pretty close matchup. I can see Dan Ige winning this one, but Bryce Mitchell, 29 years of age. Dan Ige getting a little bit older, obviously still in his prime. It's not like he's out of his prime, like 35-year-old, 36-year-old in the featherweight division. But I can just see Bryce Mitchell having a lot of success in this matchup. Dan Ige will have a 1-inch reach advantage, but again, I don't think that will really matter here, especially with how they do fight. So I am going to go with Bryce Mitchell here, just completely out grappling him to a decision. 72% picked by Tapology, 71% by decision, 20% by submission. I don't know if Bryce Mitchell gets a submission here. Maybe Dan Ige does take like the first round just due to damage, because I don't think Bryce Mitchell is going to be able to close distance as well early on. But I think as the fight goes on, he'll have a little bit more success in the second half of the first round and a lot more success in the second and third round. So I am going to go with Bryce Mitchell by decision. Up the card to the main event, we have Rafael Fiziev versus Mateusz Gamrot. Now, this is a super interesting matchup because we have two polar opposite styles, like super strong polar opposite styles clashing in the main event here. We have Mateusz Gamrot, who's a very strong wrestler and not that great of a guy on the feet. And then we have Rafael Fiziev, who's incredible on the feet and not that great of a guy on the ground. So it's going to be pretty interesting how these guys match up. Rafael Fiziev has done pretty decent in 5-round fights against guys that do take him down, like Rafael dos Anjos. He did a really good job defending the takedowns in that one and ended up getting the KO in that matchup. But Mateusz Gamrot has an insane pace that he does fight at. Is coming off a win against Jalen Turner, which is a pretty good win to have. It was a split decision win. I believe he did take that one on short notice as well. He did get caught a couple times and did react pretty poorly to some of the shots that Jalen Turner did have. And although the size advantage of Jalen Turner is a problem for a lot of those guys, I think Rafael Fiziev is just a little bit better at defending the takedowns, I'll say, especially after we saw what he did against Rafael dos Anjos in that main event and looked pretty good there. But Mateusz Gamrot is going to push a pace. He's going to be in Rafael Fiziev's space. And now if Mateusz Gamrot does look to strike with Fiziev, it is not going to be good at all. So Gamrot is just going to be looking to force some of these takedowns here. And I don't think he's going to be able to get them. I think he might get a couple of them, but I don't think it's going to be the amount of success that he does want in this matchup. And I think Fiziev is going to have a lot of success here on the feet. Mateusz Gamrot has shown to be a little bit chinnier at times. Like, he does have a pretty solid chin, but he can get knocked down quite a bit. I think he got knocked down against Armin Tsarukyan. I think Tsarukyan, I want to say, hit a spinning back fist in that, like, the third round or something like that in that matchup. And then Beneil Dariush knocked him down with a pretty brutal right hand. I think it was like the third round or something like that, or the second round. There's like a video online that you can see where it's just the noise that it made, and Gamrot got knocked down and just immediately looked for a takedown. So he has a good chin. He got hurt a couple times against Jalen Turner. He has a good chin. Again, just likes to push that pace. So we'll see how this one goes. I think if we're looking at the 4th or 5th round, it's going to be a little bit worrying for Rafael Fiziev just because of the pace that Gamrot does send at guys, and Fiziev is a very explosive guy who puts a lot into his shot. So we'll see. At least what I think Fiziev, looking more towards the body for Gamrot, where he's going to be trying to slow him down a little more, find a little bit more openings after going to the body, like slowing him down. So there is going to be a little bit more openings to where he can catch him and finish him. But I think I'm going to go with Fiziev in this one. I like the explosivity from Rafael Fiziev in here, and he's going to be a stockier guy. He's going to be a smaller guy, so it is going to be a little bit harder to get some of these takedowns. It's not going to be like a super big height advantage for Mateusz Gamrot here. He is 5'8". Fiziev will have a 1-inch reach advantage here. They're both in their primes of their careers just based on age, so odds are relatively tight here, but I think Fiziev is just going to be able to catch Mateusz Gamrot coming in. I'm looking at like a 2nd or 3rd round TKO. I think 3rd round TKO is probably what I would go with here. I think Mateusz Gamrot is just going to eat a lot of body shots, and I just think the takedowns aren't going to be as successful as he probably thought it was going to be initially into this fight. So I think Rafael Fiziev is just going to do a good job at defending some of these takedowns, especially early on. But again, as this fight goes on, 4th, 5th round, I am going to be a little bit worried for Fiziev if it ever does go that way. But I think Fiziev will end up catching Mateusz Gamrot with like a right hand coming in, and I think he ends up just finishing him by TKO here. So Mateusz Gamrot is just not that great on the feet. He's just not good defensively. It's just very basic stuff. Like, Mateusz Gamrot is a top fighter in the lightweight division, but again, it's a pretty big hole into his game, and I think Fiziev will do a better job at defending the takedowns here. Hopefully, maybe even a little bit better takedown defense after that Rafael dos Anjos fight, and I think he did have some decent takedown defense in that matchup. So I'm going to go with Fiziev here. It is relatively close for the Tapology picks here. 67% picked for Fiziev, 58% by TKO KO, 35% by decision. I like Fiziev by KO here in the 3rd round. I don't think he brutally knocks out Mateusz Gamrot, but I think he knocks him down and then finishes him up with strikes, just wails on him. So I am going to go with Fiziev in this one. Let me know who you guys think wins in the main event down below, and I'll see you guys next time.